A liquid sun once saved an empire from annihilation. For centuries, the Byzantine Empire wielded a single, terrifying secret known as Greek fire, a weapon that the sea itself. By the end of this, you will understand exactly how this ancient worked, and why its world-altering formula disappeared from history forever. We are going to uncover the chemical mysteries that made water feed the flames, and trace the fragile human chain that guarded this knowledge with a paranoid zeal. What would you protect at any cost, even if it meant a discovery could be lost to time itself arrived not with a blueprint for a building, but with a recipe for salvation? His formula was delivered into the hands of an emperor, staring down an existential threat. Arab fleets, fresh from a wave of conquests that had reshaped the world, now pressed against the very walls of Constantinople, the last great bastion of the Roman world. The empire was gasping for breath, and the sea itself seemed to turn against it. Then came the trial by fire, a literal one. Historical chronicles, like those of the Confessor, recount the moment with awe. Warships mounting strange bronze tubes on their prows, and from these tubes they unleashed not arrows or stones, but a roaring liquid sun. It did not just burn, it clung. It flowed across the water's surface, a blazing river that turned the sea into a sheet of flame, consuming enemy ships in a spectacle of absolute terror. The physical destruction was catastrophic, but the psychological victory was complete. Sailors who had braved storms and sword fights found themselves facing an element they could not comprehend, a fire that water only fed. In that instant, the narrative of the war shifted. Constantinople was no longer just a city under siege. It was a fortress guarded by a divine and unquenchable flame. Had not merely invented a weapon, he had forged a myth, an aura of technological invincibility that would shield the empire for generations. The survival of a civilization, for that moment, hung on the precise mixture of ingredients in a single, secret recipe. That unquenchable flame was more than a weapon. It was a chemical riddle wrapped in imperial secrecy. To understand why its formula became the most closely guarded state secret of its age, we first have to peer into the murky composition of the fire itself. What exactly was in that terrifying concoction? The Byzantines called it many things: liquid fire, prepared fire, sea fire, but their records, meticulously kept in other matters, fall utterly silent on its recipe. This was no accident, it was policy. The emperors knew the weapon's power lay not just in its use, but in its mystery. So we are left, centuries later, playing historical detective with fragments of evidence. The most compelling clue points to a base of crude petroleum, what they would have called naphtha, gathered from natural oil seeps around the Black Sea. This wasn't magic, it was geology, a volatile, flammable liquid already known for centuries. But naphtha alone would simply spill and burn on water. The genius was in the additives. Historians like John have pieced together likely components from tangential references and knowledge of the era's chemistry. Pine resin, sticky and thick, could have been mixed in to make the fire cling tenaciously to wooden hulls and sails. Perhaps quicklime was added, a substance that reacts violently with water, generating intense heat that could ignite the mixture on contact with the sea. Or maybe it was saltpeter, an early form of potassium nitrate, which would have made the fire burn more fiercely. Think of it not as a single ingredient, but as a primitive napalm, a sticky gel designed to maximize terror and destruction. Sulfur or pitch could have been used to thicken it further and produce choking, toxic smoke. This was not a simple torch. It was a deliberately engineered substance. Each component served a brutal purpose: adhesion, ignition, intensity, and suffocation. The very fact that modern scholars can theorize this formula based on the described effects, speaks to a sophisticated, almost scientific understanding of materials. They weren't just throwing things together, they were formulating a strategic tool. And that precise formulation, the exact ratios, the specific preparation method, that was the crown jewel. Knowing that pine resin might be involved is one thing. Knowing how to combine it under pressure in a bronze tube to create a stable stream of liquid hell was everything. This chemical knowledge was so valuable, so destabilizing, that the empire decided the only safe place for it was in the hands of a very few, and then, ultimately, perhaps in the grave. The first great mystery of Greek fire isn't just what it was made of, but the profound realization of what that knowledge represented, a power so immense its owners believed it could never be risked. Even if that meant its eventual disappearance, possessing the formula was only half the battle. The true challenge was delivering that hellish concoction across open water without turning your own ship into a funeral pyre. This is where the second great mystery of Greek fire emerges, the secret of its projection. Ancient sources speak of a device called a siphon, and it transformed the weapon from a defensive tool into a terrifying instrument of naval dominance. Imagine the scene aboard a Byzantine, a sleek warship built for speed. At its prow, mounted low on the deck, was not a catapult or a ram, but a strange bronze tube, likely made of thick metal to withstand immense pressure. This was the heart of the system. Illuminated manuscripts like the Madrid, created centuries later, give us our clearest visual clues. They show operators crouched behind large, curved shields, manhandling these tubes, directing a fierce jet of liquid flame toward enemy vessels. The image is stark, a man shielded from the very fire he commands. But how did it work? Experts who study ancient mechanics, like those analyzing the treatises of Heron of Alexandria, theorize a complex pump mechanism. The thick, sticky Greek fire mixture would have been stored in a heated, sealed tank below decks, warmed by a brazier to keep it fluid. From there, it was likely fed through reinforced leather hoses to a twin-action bronze pump operated by a crew of men. With a series of powerful strokes, they would pressurize the mixture, forcing it up through the tube and out the nozzle in a continuous, arching stream. Now, the final, critical piece: ignition. At the tip of the siphon, a small, perpetually lit brazier or a slow-burning match would have been positioned. As the pressurized jet of liquid passed through this flame, it ignited instantly, transforming into that iconic river of fire the moment it left the tube. This was not a flamethrower in the modern sense. It was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. The engineering was as brilliant as it was dangerous, requiring precise timing, immense courage from the crew, and an intimate understanding of pressure and flow. The siphon's design was guarded with the same paranoid intensity as the chemical formula itself, for it was the delivery system that made the weapon truly unstoppable. To know the fuel was one thing. To master the means of hurling it with precision and safety was the Empire's ultimate tactical advantage. A secret so potent its mechanics have been debated by historians for 1,000 years. For 4 relentless years, the fate of an empire rested on the strength of its walls and the secrecy of its fire. Beginning in the year 674, the Umayyad Caliphate, a vast and powerful force that had swept across the Middle East and North Africa, turned its full might toward the ultimate prize, Constantinople. Their strategy was a classic pincer, a massive land army camped outside the mighty walls, and a formidable fleet of Arab warships choking the city's vital sea lanes in the Bosporus. The capital of the Roman world was isolated, its lifeline to grain supplies and reinforcements severed. The Byzantines were outnumbered and surrounded, facing what seemed an inevitable end. It was in this moment of supreme crisis that the secret weapon, still a novel and terrifying marvel, was called upon not for a skirmish, but for the salvation of a civilization. The chronicler writes of the Byzantine fleet, smaller but equipped with the mysterious siphons, sailing out to confront the blockade. What happened next was not merely a battle, it was a psychological and tactical revolution. The Byzantines did not engage in the traditional manner of ramming and boarding. Instead, they held their distance, and from the prows of they unleashed the liquid sun. Contemporary accounts describe jets of fire arching across the water, striking Arab ships and igniting instantly. The flames did not just burn the hulls, they flowed across the water's surface, creating vast, moving sheets of fire that leaped from ship to ship. Panic is too small a word for the chaos that ensued. Sailors who could swim found no refuge in the sea, for the sea itself was ablaze. The strategic impact was immediate and total. The naval blockade, which had seemed an unbreakable stranglehold, was shattered in a series of fiery engagements. This allowed the Byzantines to resupply the city, reinforce its defenders, and ultimately outlast the besieging army. The four-year siege collapsed in the year 678. This victory, known as the First Arab Siege, did far more than save a city from a single threat. It proved that Greek fire was the empire's ultimate shield, a force multiplier that allowed a smaller, technologically superior navy to dominate the seas around its heartland. By preserving Constantinople, the weapon preserved the Eastern Roman Empire itself, ensuring it would endure for centuries more as a bulwark between East and West. The geopolitical map of Europe and the Near East was fundamentally altered that day. Without that fiery defense, the flow of history, of culture, of religion might have run in a completely different direction. The siege was the baptism of fire for the weapon, and in passing that test, it secured its legendary status as the guardian of an empire's destiny. The weapon's very success planted the seeds of its own disappearance. After witnessing its power at the siege, the Byzantine state made a deliberate, calculated choice. They would protect the secret of Greek fire at any cost, even the cost of its own future use. This brings us to the third great mystery. Why was a formula so vital allowed to vanish? The answer is not a single act of destruction, but a systemic obsession with secrecy, a security protocol so extreme it became a self-defeating prophecy. The emperors treated the knowledge not as science to be shared, but as a sacred trust, a crown jewel more valuable than any fortress. In a manual written for his son, the 10th century Emperor Constantine VII laid out the doctrine with chilling clarity. He stated that the recipe for the liquid fire was delivered by an angel to the first Christian emperor, and that its secrets were to be kept by the emperor and one family alone, the family. Passed strictly from father to son by word of mouth. No written records, no backup copies, just a fragile thread of whispered knowledge. This was compartmentalization on a scale that feels eerily modern, a black project from the ancient world. Imagine the process not as a single factory, but as a series of isolated cells. One guild, sworn to secrecy, might have been responsible for collecting the crude naphtha from the oil seeps of the Black Sea. Another, completely separate guild, perhaps skilled alchemists or imperial chemists, would handle the precise mixing of the additives, the pine resin, the sulfur, the saltpeter, in a sealed workshop. The final crew, the men who operated the terrifying bronze siphons on the warships, were trained only in deployment, not in preparation. They knew how to pump and aim, but not what was in the tank. This system ensured that no single person, not even a captured siphon operator, could ever betray the complete formula. It was brilliant for security in the short term, but catastrophically fragile for the long term. The entire enterprise depended on an unbroken chain of succession, on political stability, and on the family line surviving war, illness, or simple accident. What if a father died before he could pass the oral recipe to his son? What if the sole knowledgeable emperor was deposed or fell in battle? The state had prioritized immediate tactical advantage over permanent preservation. They chose to make the secret so safe that it became a time bomb. Its fuse lit the moment the first ingredient was gathered. In doing so, they transformed Greek fire from a tangible weapon into a ghost, a legend that would outlive its own substance, leaving us to wonder if the greatest threat to this ancient was not an enemy's sword, but its own keeper's vault. The most flammable target was never the wooden hull, but the human mind. Greek fire achieved something rare in the annals of warfare. It weaponized the supernatural. For an enemy sailor, the experience every law of the natural world they understood. Fire was supposed to be quenched by water. It was a fundamental truth. To see a roaring, sticky flame flowing across the waves, chasing ships and turning the sea into a lake of fire, shattered that reality. In an age where the line between science and sorcery was thin, the immediate conclusion for many was not chemistry, but curse. They believed they were facing not a technological marvel, but divine wrath or demonic magic channeled by the Byzantine emperors. This psychological impact was not a side effect, it was a calculated element of its use. The chronicler Anna, writing centuries later about its deployment, captured this perfectly. She did not just note its destructive power, she emphasized the reaction it provoked, a wave of terror and flight that swept through enemy ranks. Imagine the scene from the deck of an opposing ship. First, you see the distinctive bronze tube mounted on the approaching's prow, a shape that had become infamous through rumor and survivors' tale. Then you hear the hiss and roar as the jet of liquid ignites, arcing toward you not as a solitary missile, but as a continuous, living stream of fire. Your instinct to douse the flames with buckets of seawater would only spread the inferno. In that moment of cognitive rupture, where learned knowledge fails utterly, panic takes command. Fleets would scatter, formations would break, and coordinated attacks would dissolve into a desperate struggle for individual survival. The Byzantines understood this intimately. The mere presence of a Siphon-equipped ship in a naval theater could alter an adversary's entire strategy, causing them to avoid engagement altogether. This transformed Greek fire from a mere tool of destruction into the ultimate tool of deterrence and intimidation. Its reputation became a strategic asset, a ghost story told among sailors that often won battles before a single flame was ever lit. The empire mastered not just a chemical formula, but the alchemy of fear, proving that the most potent weapon in their arsenal was the terror they could ignite in the minds of men. This obsessive secrecy created a historical void, a missing chapter written in fire and then deliberately burned. The fourth mystery of Greek fire is the silence of the archive, the question of whether its recipe was ever truly written down, only to be erased by time and intention. We have tantalizing whispers from history that suggest it might have been. Scholars reference lost military manuals with evocative names like the Key of Heaven, which some believe could have contained technical details on the weapon's deployment or even its preparation. But no such manuscript has ever been found. Their absence is not an accident of decay, it feels like a pattern. Consider the catastrophic turning point of the year 1204, when the armies of the Fourth Crusade turned against their supposed allies, brutally sacked Constantinople. In the chaos of that conquest, great libraries and imperial workshops were put to the torch. If any scroll containing the sacred formula had survived in some forgotten vault, that conflagration would have been its most likely end. Yet the destruction may have been even more deliberate. In periods of intense political instability, when emperors faced coups or betrayal from within, a written recipe posed an existential risk. It is entirely plausible that a paranoid ruler, fearing the secret would fall into the hands of a usurper, issued a final, fatal order for every last written record to be gathered and burned. This act of deliberate erasure, layered atop the already fragile oral tradition, created a perfect storm for loss. The oral chain could be broken by a single untimely death, and the written backup, if it ever existed, could be reduced to ashes in a single afternoon. This leaves us with a haunting historical absence, the lack of a smoking gun manuscript. We are left sifting through the ashes of history, finding references to the fire's glorious effects, but never its blueprint. The silence itself becomes evidence, pointing to a security protocol so absolute that it valued the secret's safety over its own permanence, ensuring the weapon would die with the empire it was designed to protect. Centuries of silence have not extinguished the curiosity of the modern world. In laboratories far removed from the smoke of ancient battles, a different kind of siege is a chemical hunt to reverse engineer the lost flame. Historians armed with chronicles now collaborate with chemists wielding spectrometers, their shared mission to crack a code written not in letters, but in fire and fear. They begin with the most likely suspects, crude naphtha as the volatile base, thickened with sticky pine resin to make it cling. Then comes the puzzle of ignition. Some teams focus on quicklime, calcium oxide, a substance that reacts violently with water in a fierce exothermic reaction, generating enough heat to potentially set the mixture ablaze the moment it strikes the sea. Others experiment with early forms of saltpeter, potassium nitrate, which would act as a powerful oxidizer, helping the fire burn with a terrifying intensity even on a wet surface. The experiments are meticulous and often dramatic. In controlled settings, they mix and test, observing how a jet of their concoction behaves when projected toward a water tank. Some formulations do produce a thick, napalm-like gel that burns stubbornly, crawling across the water's surface. Others indeed ignite with a startling whoosh on contact, mimicking the descriptions of a fire that water itself seemed to feed. Yet, every attempt falls short in some crucial way. Perhaps the mixture is too viscous to pump through a bronze siphon, clogging the mechanism. Maybe it burns out too quickly, lacking the legendary longevity that allowed it to consume entire ships. Or its adhesion isn't perfect, sliding off treated wood where the ancient version reportedly stuck fast. Each near miss is a lesson. The ongoing scientific quest reveals something profound. The Byzantines likely stumbled upon, and then perfected, a remarkably advanced piece of chemistry. Their formula may have been discovered through trial and error, a fortunate, even accidental combination of locally available materials, but its refinement was deliberate. They mastered the balance between viscosity and flammability, between stability in storage and volatility in deployment, in a way that modern science, with all its tools, still cannot perfectly replicate. Every failed experiment in a 21st century lab doesn't just highlight a missing ingredient, it deepens our appreciation for that anonymous guild of alchemists and engineers. They solved a problem of physics and chemistry with such elegance that its solution vanished with them, leaving behind only the ghost of its glow and a challenge that still captivates us today. The weapon's flame began not in a laboratory, but in the earth itself. The fifth great mystery of Greek fire is one of geography, a direct link between the empire's survival and its control over specific, oozing patches of ground. The Byzantines did not invent their primary ingredient, they harvested it. Key regions around the Black Sea, particularly the peninsula and areas near the, were landscapes where the planet's secrets leaked to the surface. Here, natural oil seeps allowed crude petroleum, what they called naphtha, to pool in tar pits or bubble up in viscous black streams. This was not a hidden resource. It was a visible, if mysterious, part of the local environment for centuries. But the Byzantine Empire recognized its potential for war and made securing these sites a strategic imperative on par with fortifying a mountain pass or a harbor. Control of this land meant control of the weapon's very lifeblood. Once collected, the raw naphtha faced a long and perilous journey. It would have been carefully sealed in clay amphorae or barrels, loaded onto ships, and transported across the Black Sea to the imperial workshops of Constantinople. This supply chain was a critical vulnerability, a secret that had to travel in the open. One can imagine the guarded convoys, the trusted merchants, the entire clandestine operation required to keep the fiery essence flowing to the capital. This geographical reality adds a crucial layer to our understanding of the lost formula. Modern chemists attempting to recreate Greek fire often start with refined petroleum products, but these behave in a fundamentally different way than the raw. Complex cocktail of hydrocarbons gathered from a natural seep. The ancient naphtha contained a unique mix of light and heavy fractions, along with natural impurities like sulfur, which could have contributed significantly to its burning characteristics and its ability to form a stable, sticky gel when mixed with resins. The precise quality and consistency of that base material, varying from seep to seep and season to season, was a variable known intimately to the Byzantine alchemists. They would have adjusted their secret additives, the pine pitch or the quicklime, to compensate, creating a standardized weapon from a non-standardized raw material. This means the true formula was not just a list of ingredients, it was a living process, a craft honed through generations of working with one specific, gifted substance from a few special places on the map. When those sites were lost to enemy conquest, or when the knowledge of how to work with that particular crude faded, a vital piece of the puzzle vanished forever. The power of Greek fire was as much a product of the empire's soil as it was of its scientists, tying its legendary flame inextricably to the land it was destined to protect. That fragile thread of knowledge was held by one family alone. The clan were not just imperial servants, they were the living vault. For generations, the secret of Greek fire was whispered from father to son in a ritual of immense gravity, likely within the secure walls of the imperial palace itself. This was not a casual transfer of information, it was a sacred initiation, bound by solemn oaths of loyalty sworn directly to the emperor. The weight on their shoulders was unimaginable. They carried not a document, but the very essence of the empire's primary defense, a burden that isolated them as much as it empowered them. In return for this monumental responsibility, the family was granted immense privilege, wealth, and an unshakable position within the Byzantine court. Their safety, their social standing, their entire world was built upon this monopoly of knowledge. They became the sole human interface between the chemical mystery and the imperial will. This system transformed the formula from a static recipe into a living, breathing entity, a family heirloom more precious than any jewel. Yet this design contained a fatal flaw, placing the continuity of a civilization's security on the biological and political fortunes of a single bloodline. The entire arrangement was perilously fragile. If a father died unexpectedly before the final, crucial details could be passed to his heir. The chain was broken. If the family fell from grace due to court intrigue or was accused of treason, Their knowledge died with their reputation. And in the chaos of an invasion, like the horrific sack of Constantinople, if the family were lost in the violence or forced to flee without passing the torch, the practical, hands-on understanding of the mixture's precise consistency, its cooking temperature, the exact sound it made when ready, all that tacit wisdom would vanish in an instant. The empire had bet everything on the endurance of human memory, making the fate of its most powerful weapon as uncertain as the life of a single child. This intimate, human-scale vulnerability is perhaps the most poignant part of the mystery, revealing that the greatest threat to the unquenchable fire was not a foreign spy, but simple human frailty. But perhaps the greatest mystery of all is whether the secret was truly lost, or if it simply outlived its usefulness. The world did not stand still while the Byzantine Empire guarded its flame. By the late medieval period, a new technological revolution was rumbling across battlefields and echoing from the decks of ships, the advent of gunpowder artillery. The cannon changed the fundamental rules of naval engagement. Where Greek fire required a daring, close-quarters approach to bring the Siphon within range, a well-placed cannonball could smash an enemy hull from hundreds of yards away. This new weapon offered a brutal, physics-based advantage that made the complex, dangerous operation of the Siphon seem suddenly archaic. Why risk a ship and crew to spray a volatile liquid when you could stand off at a safe distance and pound an enemy into splinters? Tactical obsolescence is a quiet but powerful force. Alongside this, ship design itself was evolving. The tall, heavy carracks and galleons of the emerging European powers, built with thicker timbers and more complex rigging, were inherently less vulnerable to a clinging fire than the lighter, lower galleys of the earlier Mediterranean. A fire might scorch the superstructure, but it was less likely to cripple the entire vessel as quickly as a direct hit from solid shot. In this new world, the legendary weapon's strategic value began to fade. The immense paranoid apparatus built to protect it, the family and their sworn alchemists, would have faced a slow decline. Emperors with limited resources had to invest in the future, not the past. Funding and imperial attention would have shifted toward founding foundries and training gunners. The secret-keeping tradition, dependent on constant practice and purpose, would have atrophied from disuse. The last man to know the full formula might have been an old craftsman in a silent workshop, with no apprentice to teach, because no one saw the need anymore. In this light, the disappearance of Greek fire is not solely a tragedy of forgotten knowledge, but a story of technological evolution. It was a brilliant solution to the problems of its age, but its age passed. The empire didn't necessarily lose the recipe in a single catastrophic moment. It may have simply stopped writing it down, stopped whispering it, and turned its gaze toward the smoke on a new horizon. The flame was not extinguished, it was left to burn out, its purpose fulfilled by the relentless march of progress. The true terror of the weapon was its mobility. Greek fire was not a static defense mounted on a wall. It was a predator that hunted across the open sea, and its body was the Byzantine. This sleek, swift galley was the perfect fusion of naval architecture and specialized warfare, a vessel engineered from the keel up to wield the liquid flame. While other ships of the era were designed for ramming or for carrying archers and marines, they had a singular, terrifying purpose. Its most distinctive feature was a reinforced, raised platform at the prow, built like a small, armored citadel. This was the firing position for the bronze siphon, a structure designed to protect the operators from enemy arrows while giving them a clear, commanding field of fire over the waves ahead. The entire ship's design served this one weapon. The hull was built for speed and maneuverability, allowing the captain to close the distance with an enemy vessel rapidly, position the prow for the perfect shot, and then turn away before the spreading inferno could threaten his own crew. It was a naval ballet of precise, deadly movements. The tactical doctrine was brutally effective. A squadron would not line up for a traditional broadside. Instead, they would approach in a swift, narrow formation, their prows aimed like the heads of venomous serpents. Upon reaching the optimal range, the Siphon operators would unleash a roaring jet of fire, not necessarily aiming to sink the ship immediately, but to achieve chaos. The primary targets were the enemy's sails and rigging, the complex web of ropes and canvas that gave a ship its mobility, and the crowded deck where the crew stood. A direct hit would engulf the sails in an instant, uncontrollable blaze, dropping sheets of fire onto the men below. The panic and confusion that followed were often more decisive than the flames themselves. With the enemy ship crippled and its crew fighting for their lives, they could then choose its next move. It could stand off and watch the destruction unfold, or it could move in to board a vessel now devoid of organized resistance. This combination of revolutionary technology and tailored tactics created a naval advantage that lasted for centuries. For over 500 years, the sight of a distinctive prow on the horizon could send a wave of dread through any opposing fleet. The ship and its weapon were inseparable, a perfect symbiotic partnership where engineering enabled destruction, and destruction, in turn, defined an empire's dominion over the Mediterranean. The stream of fire had to be born at the precise moment it left the tube. This is the seventh mystery, the puzzle of the eternal spark. How did the Byzantines ignite that viscous, volatile stream reliably, every single time, without turning their own siphon and its operators into the first casualty? A constant, open flame at the nozzle seems logical, but it presented a terrifying risk. Any leak in the pressurized system, any or misdirected spray, would instantly turn the apparatus into a bomb. So historians and engineers have proposed several ingenious, and likely simpler, solutions lost in the silence of the workshop. One compelling theory involves a pre-ignited wick, perhaps made of slow-burning flax or hemp, soaked in the very fuel it was meant to light. This wick would be positioned just beyond the lip of the bronze tube, a small, shielded pilot light waiting to greet the emerging jet. The moment the pressurized liquid passed through this tiny flame, it would ignite in a seamless, roaring transformation. Another possibility is a separate chemical igniter, a paste or powder applied to the nozzle that would combust violently upon contact with air, providing the initial burst of heat needed to set the mainstream ablaze. Some have even suggested the tube itself was the key. If the bronze siphon was heated along its length by a brazier before battle, the hot metal could potentially auto-ignite the fuel as it rushed through, a principle not unlike a modern diesel engine. Perhaps the most elegant theory is that of a double fluid system. Imagine two separate tanks below deck, one holding the sticky naphtha base, the other holding a reactive chemical like quicklime or a concentrated oxidizer. Only at the moment of firing would these two streams be brought together, mixing for the first time at the very tip of the nozzle. This chemical marriage would create an immediate exothermic reaction, generating its own intense heat and igniting the mixture spontaneously upon contact with the air or the sea. This ignition puzzle remains one of the most significant hurdles in any modern attempt to recreate a functional Greek fire siphon. We can approximate the fuel, we can theorize the pump, but without knowing the exact, reliable trick for that critical spark, our recreations are incomplete. This points to a profound truth about the weapon. Its genius was not in overwhelming complexity, but in clever, practical simplicity. The solution was likely something a skilled artisan could maintain and execute under the stress of battle, a small, vital piece of craft knowledge that made the difference between a spectacular failure and a legendary weapon. That final, missing step in the process is a silent testament to the hands-on ingenuity of those forgotten operators, the men who knew not just the formula, but the precise feel of the mechanism. The exact moment to light the touch, turning a stream of liquid into a river of sun. The weapon's physical flame was extinguished, but its story was just beginning to burn. Long after the last siphon fell silent, Greek fire refused to be confined to the history books. It escaped into the realm of legend, a symbol so potent it was adopted by storytellers for 1,000 years. In medieval European chronicles, written by those who had only heard terrified rumors of the Byzantine weapon, it transformed into something even more fantastical. They called it wildfire, a magical alchemical substance that could burn stone and metal, a liquid curse that all natural law. This was no longer a military report, it was the birth of a myth. That myth found fertile ground in the modern imagination. Today, you can encounter echoes of the lost formula in the most unexpected places. In the video game Assassin's Creed Revelations, the protagonist hunts for the secrets of a mysterious Greek firebomb in 16th century Constantinople. A digital quest that mirrors our own historical curiosity. It appears in fantasy novels and epic films, often rebranded as a devastating, ancient that heroes must find or villains seek to control. Why does this particular artifact resonate so deeply? Because Greek fire has evolved into the perfect metaphor. It represents any suppressed knowledge, any ultimate power deemed too dangerous to be free. It is the prototype for every fictional doomsday device, every lost technology that could change the world. Its narrative is compelling, a secret so valuable it had to be erased, a power so great it could not be allowed to survive. This cultural afterlife performs a fascinating alchemy of its own. It takes a complex historical reality, strips away the nuanced context of naphtha and quicklime, and distills it into a pure archetype, the guarded secret. In doing so, it ensures the mystery remains alive in the collective consciousness. More people today may know Greek fire from a game or a movie than from a history text, but that very recognition keeps the real historical question burning. It reminds us that our fascination is not just with a chemical mixture, but with the human drama surrounding it, the paranoia, the sacrifice, the impossible choice between safety and knowledge. The legend, in all its fiery exaggeration, is proof that the weapon achieved a kind of immortality. It won its final victory not on the waves, but in the stories we continue to tell, ensuring that the ghost of that unquenchable flame will flicker in the human imagination for centuries to come. Names have a curious way of outlasting the things they describe. Long after the Byzantine siphon crews were gone, the terrifying title Greek fire lived on, becoming a generic label for any fearsome incendiary weapon used at sea. This is the eighth mystery, a story of imitation and confusion that has the historical waters for centuries. As the original formula vanished into legend, other maritime powers, keen to harness its psychological power, began developing their own versions. The Venetians, masters of Mediterranean trade and warfare, crafted formidable incendiary mixtures for use in naval battles, often recorded in their own military manuals under the familiar, intimidating name. Later European texts from the Renaissance period are filled with recipes for Greek fire, calling for ingredients like alcohol, turpentine, gum, and refined saltpeter. These were potent weapons in their own right, capable of horrific destruction. But are any of these the lost formula reborn, Almost certainly not. They represent a process of technological evolution and substitution. Without access to the specific crude, naphtha from the Black Sea seeps, or the guarded Byzantine process, these chemists and alchemists worked with what they had. They created effective incendiaries using locally available materials, weapons that could burn fiercely and even float on water, but they were adaptations, not rediscoveries. Think of it like a famous recipe passed down by name only. One family's secret sauce might call for a rare, locally foraged herb. Generations later, people in another country hear about the legendary sauce and try to recreate it. They use similar techniques, they might even call it by the same name, but with common spices from their own pantry. The result might be delicious and powerful, but it is a different substance altogether. This proliferation of imitations has created a persistent historical echo. When we read a medieval account of Greek fire being used in a battle off the coast of Sicily or England, we cannot automatically assume it is the Byzantine original. It is far more likely a later, derivative weapon, trading on the fearsome reputation of its namesake. This cloud of copies makes the historian's task profoundly difficult, forcing us to sift through layers of claims to find the few, precious descriptions that match the unique, terrifying behavior of the authentic substance. The name became a brand, a byword for unstoppable naval terror, and in its survival, it ironically helped ensure the true recipe would remain forever separate, a ghost behind a curtain of fiery imitations. The true power of a secret weapon lies in knowing when not to use it. Greek fire was never a standard issue armament for every ship in the Byzantine navy. It was a strategic asset of the highest order, reserved for moments of existential crisis or for shattering the will of a formidable foe. Imagine it as the empire's ultimate trump card, kept close to the chest and only played when the stakes were absolute. Its deployment was governed by a cold, calculated logic. First, the environment had to be right. The weapon demanded relatively calm seas. A rough, choppy ocean would make aiming the siphons narrow, arching stream nearly impossible, and more dangerously, it could cause the volatile mixture to slosh and leak aboard the firing ship itself, turning thee into a floating pyre. Second, it required close proximity. The effective range of the siphon was likely no more than 50 or 100 feet, a distance that demanded incredible nerve from the crew, who had to sail directly toward an enemy vessel, holding their course steady under a hail of arrows just to get into firing position. This brought the third and most critical calculation, the risk of capture. Every emperor and admiral who authorized its use had to weigh a terrifying possibility. What if our ship is boarded before it can fire, or disabled and taken? The loss of a single was a military setback, but the loss of a functional siphon, its operators, and even a tank of the precious fuel to a savvy enemy could mean the end of the Byzantine monopoly. This risk was so profound that it dictated the weapon's entire existence, shaping the compartmentalization of knowledge and the extreme secrecy protocols. Because of this, Greek fire transcended its physical form. It became a political instrument and a psychological deterrent. Its mere rumored presence in the imperial arsenal could force an adversary to change their entire battle plan, perhaps avoiding a direct naval confrontation altogether. There were likely many conflicts where the threat of the liquid fire, whispered among enemy commanders, achieved the Byzantine objective without a single flame being lit. This strategic scarcity directly fed its legendary status. By being rarely seen, its effects in those rare, apocalyptic deployments became in retelling. Each use was not just a battle, it was a spectacle, a demonstration of divine favor or unholy power that reinforced the myth for another generation. The emperors understood that sometimes, holding the ultimate weapon in reserve, letting its shadow loom large over the enemy's imagination, was far more powerful than unleashing it upon the waves. The weapon's legacy is not written only in victories, but in the air and water it poisoned. The ninth mystery of Greek fire is its hidden cost, a shadow that lingered long after the flames died down on the surface. When we reconstruct the chemistry, we must also consider the aftermath. A burning mixture of crude petroleum, sulfur, and pine pitch would not have produced a clean flame. It would have generated thick, black, choking clouds of toxic smoke, laden with acrid chemicals. This smoke would have rolled across the decks of both attacker and defender, a suffocating fog that could incapacitate crews even before the fire touched them. The environmental impact, though not a concept they would have recognized, was profound. The residue from such a substance, a sticky, oily sludge, would have sunk into the sea, coating the shoreline and the seabed. For years after a major naval engagement, local marine life in those confined straits and bays would have faced poisoned waters, a silent casualty of this ancient weapon of mass disruption. And then there is the human toll, the most sobering layer of all. For a sailor struck by the adhesive stream, there was no simple escape. The substance clung tenaciously to skin, clothing, and wood, continuing to burn with intense heat. Medical knowledge of the time offered little beyond basic salves and bandages for such catastrophic, full-thickness burns. The injuries would have been agonizing and largely untreatable, leading to immense suffering and almost certain loss of life from shock or infection. This reality forces us to look beyond the tactical brilliance and see Greek fire for what it also was. A weapon of profound psychological terror precisely because it inflicted such prolonged and horrific physical trauma. Its reputation for being unstoppable was intertwined with the knowledge of the unbearable pain it caused. This darker dimension does not diminish its historical significance, but it adds a necessary, sobering depth to our understanding. It reminds us that every technological leap in warfare carries a human price, and the true cost of this ancient marvel was measured not just in shattered ships, but in the silent suffering it left in its wake. The brilliance of its invention is forever shadowed by the brutality of its application, a duality that makes its story all the more complex and haunting. The shock of that liquid flame echoed across the sea, all the way to the courts of Baghdad and Damascus. To truly grasp the weapon's power, we must step onto the deck of an Arab warship and see it through the eyes of those who faced it. Their chronicles, written not in triumph but in sober analysis, provide the most crucial external testimony we have. The renowned Arab historian Al, writing in the 10th century, did not dismiss the Byzantine fire as a myth or a trick. He recorded it with a scholar's respect as a decisive, material factor in the repeated failures of their expeditions against Constantinople. He described it as a primary reason their mighty fleets could not break the empire's naval dominance. This is a vital perspective because it confirms the Byzantine accounts were not empty propaganda. For the Arab commanders and sailors, it was a genuine, recurring tactical nightmare. Imagine their war councils, planning another campaign to take the great city. They would have had to account for a variable that all their experience. They could not simply build more ships or train more men, they had to solve a riddle written in fire. Their strategies had to adapt, often by avoiding the very thing a navy is built for, a direct confrontation on the open water. For centuries, the mere possibility of encountering a Siphon equipped could dictate their entire operational plan, pushing them toward land-based campaigns or raids in areas where the feared weapon was not reported. This psychological shadow, cast by a technology they could not replicate or counter, became a permanent strategic constraint. The Arab historians, in their frustration, gave Greek fire its greatest historical validation. They were not storytellers trying to explain away a simple defeat. They were analysts documenting an asymmetric threat that reshaped the military balance of an age. Their awestruck accounts, born of first-hand reports and shattered campaigns, tell us that the terror was real. The weapon worked exactly as advertised, and its legend was forged in the genuine. Bewildered fear of those who watched their world burn on the water. The quest for unquenchable fire was not born on a battlefield, but in the quiet of a scholar's study. This is the 10th mystery, the hidden connection between the Byzantine and the ancient, enigmatic world of alchemy. In Constantinople, alchemists were not mere mystics. They were the early chemists of their age, conducting experiments in hidden laboratories. Driven by a philosophical desire to unlock the fundamental secrets of matter. Their goals were often spiritual, seeking the philosopher's stone to transmute base metals into gold, or the elixir of life for immortality. Yet in that relentless pursuit, they accumulated vast, practical knowledge about the properties of substances, about distillation, about combustion, and about creating powerful, reactive compounds. The line between a magical elixir and a potent incendiary was surprisingly thin. Ancient alchemical texts from across the Mediterranean and the Middle East are filled with references to preparing fierce fires, burning waters, and inextinguishable flames. These were not just metaphors, they were recipes, often guarded with the same secrecy as state military secrets. It is entirely plausible, even likely, that the breakthrough for Greek fire occurred not in a naval yard, but in a private alchemical workshop. A scholar, perhaps himself, experimenting with combinations of naphtha, resins, and reactive minerals, might have stumbled upon a mixture of terrifying potency. Recognizing its potential, this discovery would then have been presented to the emperor, transitioning from a curious artifact of philosophical inquiry to a weapon of existential defense. This link reframes the entire story. Greek fire becomes more than a military tool. It emerges as a product of a specific intellectual climate, where the pursuit of hidden knowledge about the natural world could yield results of earth-shattering practical consequence. The weapon's development sits at a fascinating crossroads, where protoscience met imperial need, where the dream of transformation was literally weaponized into a force that could transform the fate of empires. The alchemists sought to change the nature of metals, but they ended up changing the nature of warfare itself, their philosophical quest leaving a permanent, fiery scar on the pages of history. The weapon's terrifying power relied on a hidden world of mundane, meticulous work. Behind every fiery blast from a siphon lay an invisible empire of logistics, a secret supply chain that stretched from remote oil seeps to the heart of Constantinople itself. This was not a simple matter of mixing a batch it was a sprawling, state-funded black project, a medieval equivalent of a top-secret weapons program requiring constant imperial oversight. First came the harvest. Trusted agents, likely operating under the guise of ordinary merchants, would oversee the collection of raw naphtha from those critical seeps on the Black Sea's coast. This volatile substance was then sealed in thick clay amphorae or sturdy wooden barrels, their true contents known only to a select few. These containers became the lifeblood of the weapon, loaded onto unmarked ships for a perilous journey across often treacherous waters. The risk of shipwreck or piracy was not just a loss of cargo, it was a potential security breach of the highest order. Once inside the capital, the real secrecy began. Historical evidence points to secure workshops located in the most guarded precincts of the city, possibly within the labyrinthine complex of the Great Palace itself, or on isolated islands in the Sea of. Like the Prince's Islands, which were often used for exile or secluded activity, these were not open forges, they were locked laboratories. Here, the alchemists and technicians, sworn to secrecy, would undertake the dangerous process of refining and mixing. They would heat the crude naphtha in sealed vats, blending in the precise measures of pine resin, sulfur, or other additives, stirring a concoction that could ignite with a single mistake. The final prepared mixture, now a stable but deadly gel, required specialized storage. It was likely transferred into reinforced lead-lined containers or unique, thick-glazed ceramic vessels designed to prevent leakage and static sparks. These containers were then transported under heavy guard to the naval docks to be carefully loaded onto the designated. Every link in this chain, from collector to transporter to mixer to sailor, was a potential point of failure, a vulnerability that enemy spies would have paid fortunes to discover. The sheer scale of this operation, maintained in silence for centuries, reveals a profound truth. Greek fire was far more than a chemical formula. It was a monumental institutional effort. It required a bureaucracy of secrecy, a network of loyalists, and a treasury willing to fund a weapon whose very existence depended on no one ever finding out how it was made. The empire wasn't just guarding a recipe, it was maintaining a ghost, a vital, fiery spirit that lived only through the empire's relentless and paranoid will. The final recorded use of Greek fire is a whisper in the chronicles, not a roar. While its legendary dominance spanned from the 7th to the 12th centuries, pinpointing the exact moment the flame died is a challenge for historians. Sporadic and ambiguous mentions flicker in the records long after its prime. Some accounts suggest it was deployed in naval clashes against the Venetians during the 12th century, a time of intense rivalry and conflict in the Mediterranean. Other, more tantalizing but thinly evidenced reports hint at its use during the empire's final, desperate hours, the Great Ottoman Siege of Constantinople in 1453. Could the defenders, surrounded and outnumbered, have unleashed one last, fading jet of the ancient fire from the city's walls? It is a dramatic possibility, but most scholars view it as unlikely. By the time of the dynasty, the empire's last ruling family, the institutional knowledge had almost certainly fragmented or vanished entirely. The meticulous, state-funded workshops were gone, the family line was broken, and the imperial treasury was focused on more immediate, desperate needs. The last gasp was probably not a spectacular battle, but a quiet fading. It was the moment the last aging technician, who remembered how to adjust the resin mixture for winter storage, passed without an apprentice. Or when the final clay jar of properly prepared naphtha was used up and never replaced. Tracking this decline is less about finding a date and more about mapping the collapse of the secretive institutions that sustained the weapon. The flame did not simply go out, it starved, its life extinguished by the gradual erosion of the very empire it was designed to protect. The living memory flickered out not with a bang, but with a sigh, leaving behind only the ghost of its terror and a question mark in the margins of history. The ancient world was no stranger to the terror of fire in battle. For armies had hurled burning arrows dipped in pitch, catapulted clay pots filled with sulfur and charcoal that shattered into clouds of choking, flammable dust, or even launched barrels of burning oil from city walls. These were fearsome tools, capable of spreading panic and destruction, yet they all shared a critical limitation. They were fundamentally solid or granular weapons, their effects dictated by gravity and impact. A burning arrow could ignite a sail, but it could be plucked out and extinguished. A shattered pot created a momentary inferno, but one that burned out quickly on stone or dirt. None could truly command the sea itself. What set the Byzantine liquid fire apart was not the concept of an incendiary, but its revolutionary form and function. It was the first truly liquid flame, a continuous, controllable stream rather than a lobbed object. This allowed for precise aiming, like using a hose rather than throwing a bucket. More importantly, its carefully engineered adhesion meant it stuck to whatever it touched, wood, water, or flesh, creating a persistent and spreading blaze rather than a momentary flash. Compare this to other historical incendiaries, like the stink pots used in later medieval sieges, which were designed more for smoke and psychological effect than for unstoppable consumption. Even the later fictional wildfire from stories, while inspired by the legend, is often portrayed as a magical, instantly catastrophic substance. The real Greek fire was something more profound, a work of chemical engineering. Its documented effectiveness, the way it consistently shattered fleets and broke sieges for centuries, points to a specific technological leap. It solved a problem no other weapon of its time could: how to make fire itself a mobile, dominant force on the open water. For roughly 500 years, that niche remained uniquely its own. No contemporary power replicated its combination of liquid delivery, water resistance, and tenacious burn. It stood alone, a singular achievement in the long, smoky history of ancient warfare, a bright and terrifying line between the simple incendiaries that came before and the complex firearms that would eventually follow. A single monastery library could hold more secrets than an imperial vault. In the final, crumbling days of the Byzantine Empire, as political structures collapsed and invaders sacked the capital, where did the guardians of knowledge turn? Often it was to the quiet, fortified walls of remote monasteries. Places like Mount in Greece or the great libraries of the Vatican became arks for ancient texts, preserving philosophy, science, and history through the Dark Ages. This historical pattern ignites a tantalizing, almost romantic possibility for our hunt. Could a fragment of the Greek fire formula, the world's most closely guarded state secret, have escaped the burning of Constantinople and found refuge in a monk's scriptorium? Perhaps not as a straightforward recipe, but encoded within an allegorical poem, hidden in the margins of a liturgical text, or disguised as an alchemical parable about the purification of the soul. The idea is compelling. It suggests the secret didn't die. It simply went to sleep, waiting for a scholar with the right key to awaken it. This possibility has fueled the dreams of historians and treasure hunters for generations. The notion that in some dusty, forgotten archive, a manuscript still holds the chemical key to the ancient flame. Yet, when we examine the cold logic of history, most scholars express profound skepticism. The Byzantine state's security protocol was absolute and paranoid by design. The knowledge was not just restricted, it was actively prevented from being written down in any form, to eliminate exactly this risk of its surviving in a book. Monastic scribes of the era were overwhelmingly focused on copying theological works, saints' lives, and philosophical commentaries, not technical military manuals. Even if a sympathetic alchemist or a member of the family sought sanctuary in a monastery as the empire fell, entrusting the secret to parchment would have violated a lifetime of sworn oaths and the very imperial doctrine that had protected it for centuries. The chance is vanishingly small, but it is not zero. And it is that sliver of uncertainty, that ghost of a possibility, which keeps the romance of the hunt alive. It transforms every unread medieval codex into a potential treasure map, not for gold, but for a lost piece of human ingenuity. The true power of this mystery may not lie in finding a dusty recipe, but in the endless search it inspires, a testament to our enduring fascination with a fire that refused to be forgotten. That ancient dilemma echoes in the secure rooms of our own time. The Byzantine choice to erase their greatest secret presents us with a haunting, universal question. Where is the line between protecting knowledge and destroying it forever? Their system was a masterpiece of short-term security, but a blueprint for long-term amnesia. In our modern world, this tension is not confined to history books. It lives in the servers of governments and the boardrooms of tech companies. Every classified research project, every proprietary algorithm, every encrypted state secret faces the same core challenge. How do you build a vault so secure that nothing gets out, while ensuring the key itself doesn't rust away inside? Today, we call this the problem of continuity. A modern weapons system might rely on software code written by a single brilliant engineer decades ago. If that knowledge is so tightly held that it's never properly documented or shared within a secure team, what happens when that engineer retires? The institution suffers a kind of controlled amnesia, forgetting how to maintain its own most powerful tools. This mirrors the fate of the family line, a single point of failure upon which an entire capability depended. The digital age has only amplified the stakes. We now debate the ethics of strong encryption, which can protect personal privacy but also shield harmful activities from any oversight. We struggle with archiving digital data in formats that won't become unreadable as technology evolves, creating a new kind of loss, not through fire, but through obsolescence. And we grapple with dual-use technologies, like certain advances in artificial intelligence or synthetic biology, where the same breakthrough can cure diseases or create new threats. The Byzantine emperors would have understood this dilemma intimately. They possessed the ultimate dual-use technology, a substance that could defend a civilization or burn its world to ashes. Their solution was to lock it away in a human vault, prioritizing immediate control over perpetual preservation. Our modern conversations about scientific openness, about the right to repair our own devices, about the preservation of digital history, are all variations on this ancient theme. We are still asking what we owe to the future when we discover something profoundly powerful. Do we share it and risk its misuse, or guard it and risk its disappearance? The silent fate of Greek fire suggests that the greatest danger to a discovery may not be the enemy who seeks to steal it, but the protector who, in their zeal, forgets how to pass it on. The story of Greek fire is not just written in fire, but in the cold, deep waters of the Bosporus. This 13th mystery asks us to see the weapon not as an isolated invention, but as a brilliant adaptation to a very specific world, a technological solution shaped by the land, the sea, and the climate itself. Consider the environment where it was first proven. The straits surrounding Constantinople are not warm, tropical waters. They are often cold, dark, and swift-moving. For any sailor, the shock of seeing a roaring, clinging fire erupt on that frigid surface would have been doubly disorienting. The contrast was absolute, a violent, impossible heat blooming from an icy medium. This natural backdrop amplified the weapon's psychological terror, making its defiance of physics feel even more supernatural. But the environment offered more than just a dramatic stage. It provided the very ingredients for the performance. The essential feedstock, the crude naphtha, did not come from just anywhere. It was sourced from specific natural seeps in the Caucasus region and around the Black Sea, areas under Byzantine influence or control. This wasn't a generic petroleum. It was a particular chemical cocktail from those unique geological formations, with properties ancient alchemists learned to harness. The weapon's existence was literally rooted in that territory. Finally, look at the geography it was built to defend. Constantinople was a city uniquely defined by water, a peninsula guarded by the sea on 3 sides. Its lifeblood was maritime trade, and its greatest vulnerability was a naval blockade. In this context, a revolutionary naval weapon wasn't just a nice option. It was the perfect, logical answer to the city's existential dilemma. A land-based would have been useless against a fleet. Greek fire was the precise technological key for a lock made of water. Viewed through this lens, the lost formula emerges as a product of a perfect and unrepeatable convergence. It was born from the marriage of accessible local resources, a pressing strategic need defined by unique geography, and a climate that made its effects utterly shocking. The weapon was a perfect fit for its niche, a technological adaptation so specialized that when that specific world changed, the knowledge, like a species that can live nowhere else, simply faded away. Its brilliance was inseparable from the place that created it. The weapon's image was carefully crafted, long before its last flame flickered out. When a state guards a secret this closely, how does it depict the? The answer lies not in military manuals, but in the shimmering mosaics and illuminated manuscripts of the Byzantine world. Here, Greek fire was not shown as a chemical weapon, but as a symbol, a golden divine force. One of the most famous depictions comes from the Madrid, a 12th century chronicle created in Sicily long after the weapon's prime. In its vivid illustrations, we see Byzantine unleashing streams of fire upon enemy ships. But look closely. The fire is not a sticky, liquid napalm. It is depicted as elegant, straight, golden rays, more akin to bolts of lightning or beams of holy light emanating from stylized bronze tubes. The enemy ships are often shown already fully engulfed in a uniform, decorative blaze. This is not an attempt at technical accuracy. It is a deliberate artistic convention, a visual language for something the artist had almost certainly never witnessed firsthand. Several powerful reasons explain this stylization. First and most practically, the artists were likely prohibited by imperial decree from illustrating the true mechanics of the siphon or the chaotic, clinging nature of the flames. To do so would be to risk revealing operational details. Second, these artists worked from written descriptions, or, more likely, from the weapon's formidable reputation. Without a first-hand reference, they defaulted to symbols of power they understood, divine light and celestial wrath. The result is propaganda in pigment and gold leaf. By portraying the fire as clean, directed, and radiant, the art reinforced the official narrative. This was not a messy, terrifying chemical tool, but a manifestation of God's favor upon the empire. A celestial weapon wielded by the Christ-appointed emperor. The chaotic, horrifying reality of sailors burning on an oily sea was scrubbed away, replaced by an image of orderly, divine judgment. This artistic mystification served the state's purpose perfectly. It further removed the weapon from the realm of human engineering and planted it firmly in the realm of myth and sanctioned power. The art didn't document the fire, it consecrated it, ensuring that even in representation, the secret remained safe, wrapped in a cloak of heavenly gold. A captured weapon is only as valuable as the knowledge required to wield it. The 14th mystery of Greek fire asks a crucial question: did any enemy ever seize the secret for themselves? Scattered through historical chronicles are tantalizing hints that rivals came agonizingly close. There are accounts of Arab chemists, brilliant in their own right, attempting to analyze the sticky, oily residue left on the charred timbers of their burned ships. They understood they were facing a sophisticated chemical agent, not magic, and they sought to deduce its composition through careful study. In another theater, during the brutal conflicts with the Bulgarian Empire in the 9th century, there are suggestions that Bulgarian forces may have captured Byzantine equipment. Perhaps even a damaged or a disconnected siphon tube. These were not primitive foes, they were formidable powers with their own skilled engineers and metalworkers. Yet, despite these opportunities, no rival state ever successfully fielded a working equivalent of the Byzantine system. This consistent failure is one of the most telling clues we have about the weapon's true nature. It tells us the secret was not a single ingredient you could scrape off a plank. It was a holistic system, a symphony of interdependent parts where every piece had to be perfect. The crude naphtha had to be of a specific consistency from those Black Sea seeps. The thickening agents had to be mixed in exact ratios under controlled conditions to achieve the perfect balance between viscosity and flammability. Most critically, the bronze siphon itself was a masterpiece of precision engineering. Its pump mechanisms, its valve seals, the metallurgy of its tube to withstand pressure and heat, all represented a high-water mark of contemporary technology. Even if an enemy captured a siphon, they would lack the institutional knowledge to maintain it, to repair its seals, or to mix a fuel that wouldn't clog or destabilize it. Think of it like capturing a modern jet engine without the manuals, the specialized tools, or the training to rebuild its turbine blades. You have a fascinating, complex artifact, but you cannot make it fly. The Byzantines had perfected a process, a craft passed down through generations of specialized guilds. This nuanced, hands-on understanding of how to handle and pressurize such volatile components was nearly impossible to reverse engineer from battlefield salvage alone. The enemy might collect the ashes, but they could never capture the flame, for the true fire lived in the guarded minds of the men who made it work. The true price of that unquenchable flame was measured in gold and silver. Developing and maintaining Greek fire was not a simple line item in the imperial budget. It was a sprawling, state-funded enterprise that consumed a significant portion of the empire's wealth. This was not a weapon you could simply invent and then set aside. It required a continuous, massive investment to keep the secret alive and ready. First, consider the raw materials. Securing the crude naphtha meant funding entire expeditions to the oil seeps of the Black Sea, a logistical operation involving ships, crews, and trusted agents. All operating under a veil of secrecy that itself added cost. Then came the human capital. The family, as the living vaults of knowledge, were not just sworn to secrecy, they were lavishly compensated for their loyalty and their immense risk. Their wealth, their status, their entire livelihood was a direct expense of the program, a retainer paid to ensure their silence and continuity. Beyond them were the guilds of specialized craftsmen, the alchemists who mixed the volatile brew in their sealed workshops, and the metalworkers who forged the intricate bronze siphons. These were not common laborers, they were master artisans whose unique skills commanded premium wages and whose loyalty had to be purchased and maintained. Finally, the weapon needed its chariot, the specialized warships. These vessels were not standard galleys, they were custom-built from the keel up, with reinforced prows and internal layouts designed specifically to house the siphons and their dangerous fuel tanks. Building, maintaining, and crewing, a fleet of these ships represented a colossal naval investment dedicated to a single, secretive purpose. The economic burden raises a fascinating question of imperial governance. How did the emperors justify this enormous, ongoing expense to their treasury ministers, especially during long stretches of relative peace? The answer lies in a cold calculus of deterrence. They argued successfully that the cost of maintaining Greek fire was infinitely lower than the cost of losing Constantinople. It was an insurance policy on the empire itself. The weapon's mere existence prevented invasions, broke blockades, and secured the maritime trade routes that were the empire's economic lifeline. In that light, the gold spent on the family and the secret workshops was not an extravagance. It was the essential premium paid for the empire's continued survival. This financial reality underscores the weapon's supreme value more powerfully than any battle account. The Byzantine state, often strained for resources, chose to allocate a significant part of its budget not to visible monuments or larger armies, but to a ghost, a capability that existed in whispers and shadows. They banked on the idea that the most powerful weapon was one that could win wars without ever being fired, and they were willing to pay a fortune to keep that ghost alive. Perhaps the most unsettling mystery is not how the formula was lost, but why no one seemed to rush to find it. As centuries turned and warfare evolved with the thunder of cannon, a quiet ethical shift may have taken root within the culture that once revered the flame. Could there have been a collective, subconscious decision to let this particular power fade? The weapon that saved an empire was also a tool of profound suffering, inflicting a specific kind of terror that later generations might have viewed as crossing an unspoken line. While knights and armies still clashed in brutal combat, there was a code, however romanticized, to that violence. Greek fire operated outside any such code. It was impersonal, chemical, and cruel in its persistence, denying even the refuge of the sea. As military thought gradually moved toward ideals of honor and more civilized conflict, at least in theory, the old liquid fire may have begun to seem less like a marvel and more like a barbaric relic. This wouldn't have been a formal decree or a council's vote. It would have been a slow cultural turning away, a loss of institutional will. The master artisans who once commanded premium wages for their secret craft might have found their skills no longer in high demand, not because they were forgotten, but because the empire's conscience, or its self-image, had quietly changed. Funding would have dried up, apprentices would not have been sought. The knowledge wasn't actively destroyed, it was simply no longer cherished. In this light, the disappearance transforms from a historical accident into a kind of passive choice. A society, consciously or not, may have decided that some doors, once opened, are better left closed. The ethical weight of wielding such a horrific force could have become a burden greater than the tactical advantage it provided. So the workshops fell silent, not with a bang of destruction, but with the slow sigh of neglect, as if the civilization itself had decided to walk away from its own most terrifying creation, leaving it to dissolve into the safer, more distant realm of legend. The shadow cast by that ancient flame stretches far beyond the medieval world, reaching into the heart of our most pressing modern anxieties. The strategic calculus surrounding Greek fire reveals a chillingly familiar pattern, one that defines our own era of weapons capable of unimaginable destruction. At its core, it functioned as a psychological and strategic instrument first, a physical weapon second. Its primary role was deterrence. The mere rumor of its presence in the Byzantine arsenal could paralyze an enemy fleet, altering battle plans and political strategies without a single drop of fuel being expended. This is the foundational principle of modern nuclear strategy, often termed mutually assured destruction. The weapon's existence and the credible threat of its use maintained a tense but stable peace, preventing the very conflicts it was designed to win. The Byzantine Empire, in guarding its monopoly with paranoid zeal, was engaged in history's first documented nonproliferation treaty with itself. A desperate attempt to prevent a terrifying knowledge from spreading beyond a sacred few. Their entire security apparatus, from the isolated family to the compartmentalized workshops, mirrors the extreme secrecy and need-to-know protocols surrounding contemporary research into catastrophic technologies, where the fear of a single leak drives immense institutional complexity. Yet the story of its loss offers a profound and often overlooked cautionary tale for our time. We focus so intently on the fear of these technologies proliferating that we seldom consider the opposite risk, the danger of them vanishing. The Byzantine system was so focused on preventing external theft that it failed to ensure internal continuity. The knowledge became too fragile, too dependent on unbroken human chains and political stability. In our modern context, this translates to a haunting question. What happens to the safety protocols for a stored weapon, or the containment procedures for a dangerous pathogen, if the institutional memory of how to manage them fades over generations of peace? A formula locked away in a digital vault, encrypted and forgotten, is as lost as one whispered and then silenced. Studying this ancient, therefore, is not just an exercise in historical curiosity. It provides a deep-time lens through which to examine our own enduring dilemmas. How do we control what we create without stifling the very progress that defines us? How do we protect society from a discovery without erasing that discovery from the human story altogether? The Byzantines chose absolute control, and in doing so, they chose eventual oblivion for their creation. Their ancient struggle illuminates our own precarious balance, reminding us that the guardians of world-altering power must walk a razor's edge between sharing too much and preserving too little. The battlefield was not just a scene of light and heat, but of a suffocating, distinctive stench. While chroniclers focused on the visual spectacle of Greek fire, they often ignored the sensory assault that accompanied it, an olfactory signature as terrifying as the flames themselves. To understand this, we must move beyond sight and consider the chemistry of its smoke. A weapon based on crude petroleum, thickened with pine resin and likely containing sulfur, would not have burned cleanly. When ignited, this cocktail would have produced a thick black plume carrying a complex and horrifying aroma. Imagine the overwhelming scent of burning tar, that acrid, choking smell of hot asphalt, mixed with the dense, oily bitterness of combusting crude oil. Layered on top of that would be the sharp, pungent note of burning pine sap, and possibly the rotten reek of sulfur dioxide. This was not the simple smell of a campfire. It was the industrial perfume of a chemical fire centuries before the industrial age. For the soldiers and sailors on the water, this smell would have been a terrifying precursor. On a calm day, the wind would carry the stench of the Byzantines' preparation long before the ship came into visual range. That first acrid tang in the air would have signaled impending, unimaginable horror, triggering a primal dread. The smoke itself was a weapon, an immersive layer of the experience designed to disorient and demoralize. It attacked the senses of sight, taste, and smell simultaneously, creating a full-body atmosphere of dread. In the close quarters of a wooden ship, with the scent of burning resin and oil permeating everything, the experience became inescapable. This olfactory dimension completes our understanding of Greek fire's psychological impact. It wasn't just a weapon you saw, it was a presence you breathed, a taste of hell that lingered in the air and in the memory long after the last flame had sunk beneath the waves. This hunt for a lost flame is the historian's craft in its form. Without a single, definitive recipe to consult, scholars are left with a puzzle where most of the pieces are missing, and the picture on the box has long since faded. Their work becomes a meticulous act of triangulation, pulling threads of evidence from wildly different sources and hoping they converge on a truth. It begins with the texts, but not with the hope of a straightforward answer. Instead, they comb through chronicles and military manuals for oblique, almost accidental clues. A poet's metaphor comparing a naval battle to a sea of liquid gold, a diplomat's offhand remark about the stench of Byzantine fire, a monk's note on the properties of Black Sea naphtha. These scattered fragments are collected like forensic evidence. Each vague reference is a data point, a hint at the weapon's behavior, its appearance, or its ingredients. Next, they turn to the realm of possibility, consulting not with librarians but with chemists. They ask, what substances available in the 7th century could possibly create the effects described? This is where the theories of naphtha, pine resin, and quicklime are born, not from a document, but from a process of elimination and experimental archaeology. Then there are the images, like those stylized golden rays in the Madrid Manuscript. While not photographically accurate, they offer crucial clues about the delivery system, the placement of the siphon on the ship, the posture of the operators. The very fact that it was projected from a tube and not hurled in a pot. Finally, they examine the echoes, the later medieval recipes from Venice or France that boldly use the name Greek fire. By comparing these imitations to the original descriptions, historians can identify which elements might be genuine holdovers and which are later innovations, separating the core signal from centuries of noisy adaptation. This is detective work on a centuries-old scale, where a single new scrap of parchment from a monastic archive or a chemical analysis of residue on a shipwrecked timber can overturn decades of academic consensus. The story of Greek fire, then, is not just a tale of ancient chemical engineering. It is equally the story of how we reconstruct lost histories from fragments and shadows, patiently building a plausible narrative from whispers, ashes, and the silent testimony of things left behind. Perhaps the most profound secret was that the recipe itself was never static. A weapon that defended an empire for over 500 years could not have relied on a single, unchanging formula, locked away in a vault and untouched by time. The world does not work that way. Trade routes shift, natural resources dwindle or are cut off by war, and new discoveries are made. This leads us to a compelling and often overlooked possibility. What if Greek fire was not one secret but many? What if the term described not a single, sacred recipe, but a category of terrifying incendiary weapons, a family of closely related formulas that evolved alongside the empire that wielded them? Think of it like a language. The core purpose, to communicate, remains constant, but the specific words and dialects change with the people and the places. The fundamental goal of Greek fire was always the same: to create a liquid that burned on water and clung to ships. But the ingredients to achieve that goal may have been surprisingly flexible. Consider the practical realities. The primary ingredient, crude naphtha, came from specific seeps around the Black Sea. But what if a political upheaval or an enemy blockade cut off access to the best source? Imperial alchemists would not simply give up. They would have experimented with other flammable oils, perhaps those from different regions, and adjusted their thickeners and additives to make the new base work. Pine resin from Anatolia might have been substituted with a different tree sap from Greece if supplies ran low. The precise mixture of saltpeter or quicklime could have been tweaked based on what was available in a given decade. This theory transforms the mystery. It suggests the guardians of the flame were not just passive keepers of a static scroll, but active innovators, constantly refining and adapting their craft to the realities of a changing world. The secret, then, was not a list of ingredients carved in stone. It was the underlying chemical principle, the deep, practical understanding of how to combine volatile substances to achieve a specific, terrifying effect. This knowledge would have allowed them to produce a functional weapon even with imperfect or substitute materials. It makes the loss of the formula far more understandable and far more complete. For if Greek fire was a living tradition of chemical craftsmanship, its true essence died not with the loss of a single parchment, but with the extinction of the entire guild of masters who held that adaptable, hands-on wisdom. They didn't just forget a recipe, they forgot how to improvise one. The last man to know the secret didn't hold a fixed list in his head. He held a lifetime of instinct, of knowing the smell of the naphtha when it was ready, the exact sound the mixture made as it thickened, the way a substitute resin changed the flow. When that lived experience faded, what was lost was not a single key, but the entire locksmith's art. The search for the one true formula may be chasing a phantom, because the real fire was always changing, always evolving, a flickering shadow cast by the brilliant, adaptable minds that kept it alive for centuries. That complete absence of a final answer is precisely what holds us in its grip. Greek fire is not just a historical footnote, it is a mirror reflecting our own timeless fascinations back at us. We are captivated first by the romance of lost knowledge, the haunting idea that a piece of human genius, powerful enough to save a civilization, could simply vanish from the world. It speaks to a deep-seated fear that progress is not a straight line, but a fragile thread that can be severed, leaving us forever wondering what brilliance has been left behind in the shadows of time. This weapon embodies the ultimate what-if of history. Imagine a world where that formula had survived the fall of Constantinople, passed not into oblivion, but into the burgeoning scientific revolution of Renaissance Europe. How might the course of naval warfare, of chemistry, even of empire have been altered? The speculative possibilities are endless, and that open-ended question is a powerful engine for our imagination. Furthermore, it represents a primal tension in the human relationship with power. We are both drawn to and terrified by the idea of an ultimate force, a secret so potent it must be contained. Greek fire sits at that exact crossroads, a technology that was both savior and a burden too great to bear. Its story validates our instinct that some knowledge carries a weight of responsibility that can become unbearable, leading to a conscious or unconscious choice to let it fade. This makes it a perfect historical puzzle. The stakes could not be higher, the geopolitical impact is clear and documented, yet the core secret remains utterly gone. There is no dusty manuscript waiting to be found, no stone for ancient napalm. This beautiful, frustrating lack of closure is what ensures its immortality in our culture. It is a mystery that can never be fully solved, only explored, debated, and reimagined. That is why it will continue to fuel novels, documentaries, and endless discussions, inviting each new generation to stare into the flames and see not just a weapon, but a story about us. About what we choose to keep and what we are willing to let go. From desperate defense to silent laboratories, this journey ends not with a recovered formula, but with a deeper understanding of the human drama it represents. We have followed the chemical trail of naphtha and quicklime, traced the strategic genius of the siphon, and witnessed the immense burden placed on a single family sworn to silence. The true story of Greek fire is not merely one of a lost recipe. It is a profound meditation on the relationship between power, secrecy, and time itself. This ancient stands as a monumental testament to how a single, brilliant technological advantage can bend the arc of history, preserving a civilization against overwhelming odds for centuries. Yet its disappearance offers an equally powerful warning about the peril of guarding knowledge too closely, of building a vault so perfect that the treasure inside is eventually forgotten. The silence left behind asks us a difficult question. If you were an emperor, holding the fate of your civilization in a single formula, would you have dared to write it down? Would you risk its theft to ensure its survival, or accept its eventual loss as the price of absolute control? That dilemma echoes far beyond the walls of Constantinople, into our own age of encrypted codes and sealed archives. While the exact mixture may remain forever locked in the past, its legacy burns brightly in our collective imagination. A ghost of ingenuity that reminds us some discoveries are defined as much by their absence as by their power. Share your own perspective on that imperial choice in the comments below, and subscribe for more journeys into the heart of history's greatest mysteries. Remember, some flames are not meant to be rekindled, only understood, their eternal glow a beacon for our endless curiosity.